she persuades you that while you may disagree on regulation, that in fact she supports a Second Amendment right to bear arms?
Well, the D.C. versus Heller decision was very strongly, and she was extremely angry about it. I watched. I mean, she was very, very angry when upheld, and Justice Scalia was so involved, and it was a well-crafted decision.
By the way, according to the Supreme Court, what the Washington, D.C. law was, and this is to use the court's words, total ban on handguns. That's how the Supreme Court described the gun control laws in Washington, D.C. Again, the word toddler did not appear in the majority decision, did not appear in any of the dissenting decisions.
But Hillary was extremely upset, extremely angry, and people that believe in the Second Amendment and believe in it very strongly were very upset with what she had to say.
Well, let me bring in Secretary Clinton. Were you extremely upset?
Well, I was upset because, unfortunately, dozens of toddlers injure themselves, even kill people with guns.
By the way, how many toddlers are alive because mommy or daddy or grandma or granddad was able to get a firearm and defend the toddler? She talks about 30,000 people being killed with guns. Half of those are suicides, by the way. And when the Brady Bill got passed, and states that previously did not have the same kinds of waiting periods and other impediments to getting a firearm, now had to impose them, it turns out that gun suicides did in fact go down. But overall suicides did not. People just used an alternative method. But again, this is the debate, or the part of the debate that the gun grabbers never ever engage in. How many lives are spared every year because someone was able to get a firearm and defend himself or herself or a loved one? How many? I did a documentary called Michael and Me, interviewed a professor of criminology in Florida named Gary Kleck. And he said, in a sense, adjusted the number downward because violent crime has gone down. But right now, he says 1.25 million Americans every single year have used a firearm to protect himself, herself, or a loved one. And out of that number, 40% believe but for the firearm, they would have been dead. Now, when I say use a firearm, I don't mean firing it. Often it's just brandishing it, showing the bad guy you have it. 1.25 million every single year. Now, that number is in dispute. And Obama ordered the CDC to do its own study. And the CDC, for some reason, can't do any original research, so they looked at various studies, including those by Gary Kleck. And the CDC very quietly issued a report and said at least as many lives are saved as are lost with firearms. At the very least, it said. Let me continue.
Because, unfortunately, not everyone who has loaded guns in their homes takes appropriate precautions. But there's no doubt that I respect the Second Amendment, that I also believe there's an individual right to bear arms. That is not in conflict with sensible, common sense regulation. And, you know, look, I understand that Donald's been strongly supported by the NRA. The gun lobby's on his side. They're running millions of dollars of ads against.
Of course, the NRA is a four-letter word.
To me, and I regret that, because what I would like to see is for people to come together and say, of course we're going to protect and defend the Second.
Okay, I can't take it anymore. By the way, when the movie Bowling for Columbine came out, I went to the theater where they just had shown it, and posters, and I stood in front of the posters. And when people came out, I asked them, if you define a child as 10 years old or younger, how many children die every year because of firearms? And most people assumed I was an anti-gun person, so they spoke with me. And the average answer was about 300 or 400 a year. Now, it varies depending upon the year, but generally speaking, it's anywhere from 25, 30, 35, 40, maybe 50. And people said 300, 400, one guy said 1,000, one guy said 2,000. It's very rare. How many children, 10 years and younger, are alive because somebody was able to get a firearm and protect himself or herself. I don't know. Does it matter? I used to have the chief of police, LAPD, Bernard Parks, on my show once a month. He's an anti-gun guy. Does not want citizens to carry permits. Is in favor of a lot more common sense gun laws. And I once asked him how many people are alive because of firearms. He said, I don't know. I said, how many do you think? He said, I don't know. I said, do you think it's relevant? He said, no. I said, you don't think it's relevant to know how many people are alive because of firearms and you want more restrictions? He said, no. And I said, you know, in Switzerland, by law, homes have a firearm and weapons. And he said, I don't live in Switzerland. So what do you say? What do you say to that? How do you respond to that? You come back, the issue of abortion